Hello from Ohio and welcome. What do you do when the DIY teleprompter ideas you found on the internet don't work quite as well as you really want? You make your own version. Let's learn how to do it together, this time on Just Making It with Josh. I've used a couple of different devices for a teleprompter in making these videos. Now, on my first effort, I used a piece of glass from a picture frame, a 3-ring binder, some black tape, and a cut-up coat hanger based on a video I found on YouTube. It was cheap and it worked, but it definitely had some room for improvement. Now, the next was a simple teleprompter idea I found on Thingiverse that worked, but I found myself constantly fiddling with it. I probably could have bought a teleprompter, but where's the fun in that? Instead, I decided to start with the concept of that second teleprompter and really customize it by adding a hood around the camera to make it as dark as possible on the inside while still being functional. Now, the end result? I think it's a pretty good teleprompter that you can make for yourself. Let's get started on making it. This is probably one of the simpler parts list because there's not a whole lot needed to make this project. Now, the project itself contains 12 separate parts that need 3D printed. I'm using my Ender 3 V2, but bed size is important to pay attention to here. The largest part is around 200 millimeters across. You're going to want to make sure your bed is big enough to handle a part that size. Now, on the printer, you're going to need some filament to print out all the parts. I went with PLA because this is primarily an indoor low temperature project. I used black for the hood of the teleprompter, but you could use anything you have lying around and just paint the inside black. Keeping it dark on the inside's key. Now, the glass for the teleprompter is simply glass out of an 8-inch by 10-inch picture frame that's about 2 millimeters thick. Additionally, you're going to need some bolts. You're going to need 16 bolts, 16 nuts. The holes are designed to accommodate M3.5 bolts, and you want them to be at least 25 millimeters long. Your nuts are going to be M5s, which you'd use an 8 millimeter wrench to tighten. You're also going to need a 1/4 inch by 20 winged bolt with accompanying washer to attach the camera to the mount. Now, why mix imperial measurements and metric? Well, that's just how things work sometimes. You'll also need a couple small binder clips and a piece of black cloth to close up the back of the project. Lastly, you might want some electrical tape just to seal up those edges to keep that light from seeping in on the sides. In terms of software, the only thing you'll absolutely need is a slicer. I'll be using Cura. Now, please note that none of the products or software have sponsored any portion of this video. My design is based upon Speedy 777's design that I found on Thingiverse. A link to that version is in the description below, along with the YouTube video that showed me the 3-ring binder version I mentioned earlier. I heavily modified Speedy's version using FreeCAD, including making the tripod mount be built directly into the base instead of as a separate plate. As you can see here in FreeCAD, there has to be a lot of pieces just to accommodate the limitations imposed by the smaller build plate size. But in all honesty, that limitation kind of made designing this project rather fun. Although seeing it in FreeCAD isn't really all that fun of a way to view it. I think we can do a little bit better than that. There, that looks much better. But just a few things to consider when printing. On the pieces with pegs sticking out of the sides, you're going to need to print it with supports. Otherwise, the pegs likely aren't going to print properly. And on the frame sides, it's better to print them with the large flat sides down. You're also going to need to use supports on the camera mount piece. I'll be honest, I struggle removing those supports. But overall, this isn't a hard print, it's just time consuming because it's 12 different parts. So let's go ahead and get these things printed. The first thing we're going to do is attach the camera base to the main base. Now, I pushed the nuts into the camera base and they fit rather snugly. Make sure your camera frame is properly oriented. One side is missing a cross piece on the bottom. It goes off the back of the camera base. If you flip it the wrong way, your frame piece holes won't line up with their holes on the main base. Once you have it oriented properly, put in your 4 bolts up through the bottom of the main mount and up through the camera mount. You want to snug them up but don't over tighten and mess up your pieces here. It's just plastic we're dealing with. You next go through one of the larger side frames, which contains the slot that the glass sits in. Carefully place the nut in its slot, then bring your bolts up from the bottom of the main mount. Do this for both of the bolts. Again, snug them up. Now grab the smaller side frame that sits behind the frame you just attached. The bottom peg is simply there for alignment. The top peg should fit quite snugly into the hole, likely without the need for glue. Go ahead, attach it to the main base, again using one nut and a bolt from underneath. Then we'll repeat this process on the other side so that both of the side frames are in place. Next, we'll add the arms that will hold your tablet. I went ahead and started by getting all 3 bolts all the way through the arms, but without going past the edge of it. This made it much easier to attach the arms than to the main base. Just line up the holes, start screwing things in. The hole is just big enough for the bolt, so you'll likely have to screw them all the way through. Make sure that the arms are oriented properly so that the end pieces point up instead of down, as they are what helps keep your tablet from moving all over the place. Once all the bolts are in place, you can then thread your notes onto each of the bolts and just tighten them up a little bit. If you use a 25mm long bolt, you'll notice you have a good bit of overhang. You could use shorter bolts if you like. I just happen to have these lying around. Now we can turn our attention to the top. Each of the 4 pieces are different, and you're going to want to be careful to assemble them in the proper order. As you can see, they all interconnect in only one way. There's only one way that really makes sense, but do take your time and make sure you have them all lined up. The pegs and holes will be very tight, and you will need to press them in place, but they probably aren't going to need glue to keep them all together. After this, we can tape up the sides of the frames with some black electrical tape. I did it just to keep light from coming in the sides. I also went ahead and put tape along the seams of the top. Next, it's time to slide the glass into place. Just be careful, take your time, and slip it in through the slots. You might need to fiddle with it a little bit, but when it's in place properly, it will sit evenly with the top of the side frames. Now, just set your top in place. The pegs there are only for alignment and not to firmly hold the top. That way you can easily remove the top if you want to more easily clean your glass. As with the sides, you might want to put electrical tape where the top and side meet, just to reduce light from leaking in. At this point, we're ready to mount the camera. Take the winged bolt and slip it in the washer, then press it up through the camera mount. Now just screw it into the bottom of your camera and position your camera lens near the glass front. To finish things off, take your piece of black cloth and attach it to the top with your binder clips. Again, I wanted something that was easy to remove. Additionally, by using a cloth like this, it makes it simpler to run microphone cords or other cords into your camera. Also, this might just be for me, it lets me once again use my kid's old Batman cape, which I've been using with my other teleprompters just to make it easier to see. I always like bringing little pieces like this from one project to the next if I can. And that's it. You're ready to attach the teleprompter to your tripod using the built-in mount. Then put your tablet into the arms and watch those words go flying on by on the screen. I used Speedy 777's design for a little while, and it was perfectly functional. It just didn't do quite everything I wanted. And while my version of a teleprompter isn't perfect, I must say, having filmed this video on it, I think I want to keep it around for a while. It may have taken me a while to design and print, but it was really a lot of fun to create. I do hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, consider liking and subscribing. I look forward to seeing you next time.